We're TTB, the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau.
Today we'll be talking about what to expect in a distilled spirits plant excise tax audit. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then the next slide. Okay, here's the TTB disclaimer page. This slide covers the TTB disclaimer. If you've tuned into any of the other TTB presentations in the past, you've probably seen something similar. The slide states that the presentation material could change if you happen to review these slides at a later date if they are made available, to make sure to check the most current regulations, as regulations can change. Also, this information is being presented to help the public understand and comply with the laws and regulations that TTB administers. It is not intended to establish any new or change any existing laws and regulations. Next slide. Next, we want to share with you our mission statement at the Tax Audit Division, or commonly referred to as TAD. The three things to take away from this slide. The first thing, we want to ensure the proper payment of federal excise tax. The second takeaway is we want to protect the tax revenue by ensuring compliance with laws and regulations. And lastly, we want to prevent unlawful activity in the commodities that TTB regulates. As you will see in future slides, our audit process is designed to accomplish these things. Okay, here's our organizational chart. As you saw on the poll question, our tax audit division is headed by the director and deputy director. We have 6 regional offices and a forensic analysis office. Later in the presentation, we'll cover who the audit directors are, as well as their contact information. Our office works under the audit director in Central 1, and our office specializes in distilled spirits. Next slide. Okay, now that you have a sense of our structure, we will now talk about our audit standards and how we conduct an audit. We conduct our audits in accordance with specific standards. These standards ensure our audits are high quality and that we operate in a way that we are independent, objective, competent. We must actually meet continuing education requirements as auditors, and that we use professional judgment, to name a few. These standards are called the Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, or commonly referred to as the Yellow Book. The Yellow Book is published by the Government Accountability Office, or the GAO. Also, when we perform our audits, we want to provide a value-added service for both the industry member and TTB. We accomplish this through partnering with the industry member by focusing on promoting voluntary compliance and by using a no surprises approach. This means that when we find issues, whether they are tax or compliance, we let the industry member know right away versus surprising the industry member later and only identifying them in the closing meeting. Next slide. Okay, next we will discuss types of assignments. We perform 3 types of assignments: limited scope reviews, full scope audits, and desk reviews. However, we mainly perform limited scope reviews and full scope audits. We do not typically perform desk reviews because, as I mentioned before, we want to provide a value-added service, and we find it's more productive and beneficial when we are there in person. Lastly, all permitted industry members are subject to an audit or review at any time, and technically prior notification is not required. However, our process involves prior notification through an engagement letter, and this will be discussed later in the presentation. Our audit process consists of the following: audit planning, which involves sending out the engagement letter. We will also discuss each audit step in more detail in the upcoming slides. After our audit planning process is complete, we will hold an opening conference. The opening conference date will be noted in the engagement letter, and the opening conference kicks off the audit. This is normally always done on the first day of fieldwork and shortly after we arrive at the industry member. After the opening conference, we start audit fieldwork, which is on site at the industry member. The audit fieldwork lasts typically anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. After the audit fieldwork is complete, we will hold a closing conference. This will be informal and normally doesn't last more than an hour. At this point, as we mentioned before, there should be no surprises because all the issues have been discussed, but we still share our audit findings. After our closing conference, we will issue a management letter, and this will close out the audit formally. Okay. As I noted before, we will discuss each of the audit processes in more detail, beginning with audit planning. After the industry member is selected, our planning process typically includes some of the following. We review and analyze the monthly operational reports and tax returns. For example, we foot and cross-foot all monthly reports and semi-monthly tax returns for mathematical accuracy. We also perform analytical procedures on information reported on the monthly reports. Lastly, we perform reconciliations of taxable removals and we recalculate tax rates. We review the tax rates for reasonableness, and anything unusual we'll ask for support, and we can follow up during fieldwork. We will also review all increasing and decreasing tax adjustments on the tax returns, and we follow up on anything unusual regarding the adjustments during fieldwork as well. Also, we review other data filed with the National Revenue Center, such as organizational charts, special authorizations, variances, claims, and other background information on the industry member. This is done so we can get an understanding of what to expect when we're on site during fieldwork. Also, we want to ensure our audit risks are identified and aligned with our audit objectives during fieldwork. We also review prior TTB audits and investigations, only if the industry member was audited or investigated before, and this is always our starting point, and we follow up on any previous issues to ensure that the issue has been corrected. After the majority of the planning work is completed, we notify the industry member of the planned audit or review through issuance of the engagement letter. A couple of things that you can expect to see on an engagement letter would be when we plan to begin the audit, what type of assignment, how many auditors will be on the assignment, the audit or review period, what we intend to audit or review, and contact information for the individual who will be leading the audit. We will wait 1 to 2 business days after the engagement letter is received by the industry member, and then we will call. We will confirm the dates and see if the industry member has any questions. Then we will forward the taxpayer information request list to the industry member. This list outlines the information that we'll review during the audit. The information request list is given to the industry member approximately 1 week on average before an audit begins to allow the industry member time to get the information together. The information list will be discussed in more detail on the next 2 slides. Okay, as I mentioned before, the taxpayer information request list may include requests for the following: powers of attorney, organizational charts and premises maps, bonds and proof of premium payments, approved notice of a registration. We typically don't ask for the chart of accounts, general ledgers, financial statements, and bank statements on distilled spirits audits, but have discussed so going forward. And then documented internal control procedures, especially on full scope audits. The taxpayer information request list also can ask for historical physical inventory records, a database of taxable and non-taxable removals. We request this in an electronic format and prefer Microsoft Excel, but can work with the industry member on another format, supporting documentation for items reported on the excise tax returns, including any increasing or decreasing tax adjustments, and then supporting documentation for items reported on the monthly operational reports, for example, losses, destructions, and shortages. And then as you will see later in the presentation, these are also common audit findings. And lastly, IT plant security procedures and disaster recovery plans, especially on full scope audits. And then lastly, I wanted to mention if the taxpayer has any questions on any of these items on the request list, is to go ahead and call the audit in charge and ask. Also, if taxpayers are unsure of what we were requesting, the taxpayer can always send us an example to eliminate pulling unneeded information. This could save the taxpayer significant time, and this goes back to us partnering with the industry member. Also, our information request list and audit period covers 3 years. Therefore, the taxpayer information request list will not go back anything further than 3 years. Yeah, next slide. Okay, the opening conference, what to expect and when does it occur? We perform this on the first day typically. Introductions are done between the audit team and the industry member. We want to get an understanding of who the key players are over each of the audit section, the key contacts to ask questions. We discuss the projected length of the audit or review, and then questions can be asked to the audit team at this point. We also review the status of the assistance list. It's extremely helpful to have the majority of the items on the information request list ready by the time we arrive. Lastly, we complete a plant tour to get familiar with the layout of the industry members' operations. Okay, next slide. After the opening conference is completed, we start audit fieldwork. Audit fieldwork, like I mentioned before, can last anywhere between 2 and 4 weeks. Based on the information request list, this gives the taxpayer a good understanding of the records we review. We also complete walkthroughs and perform internal control questionnaires of any key processes, for example, taxable removals. Also, we perform inventories of finished goods in barrel warehouses and perform observations of certain processes. Lastly, and this will be covered later in the presentation, but we are reviewing the movement of spirits through the different phases of production, storage, and processing. Records are required to be maintained that support the transactions that occur daily, and then these daily records flow to the summary records that get recorded on the monthly reports and tax returns. Title 27 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 17, which is discussed later in this presentation, is a good starting point for understanding the applicable regulations on what is required. Okay, next slide. After audit fieldwork is complete, we hold a closing conference. As I noted before, this is more of a formality because all the issues have already been discussed with the industry member. There should be no surprises. Audit findings are discussed with the industry member and audit recommendations and instructions are provided. Also, any corrective actions that need to be implemented can be discussed. As part of the audit closing conference, we provide a closing conference agenda to the industry member that goes over the issues. This is normally provided to the industry member right before the closing conference. Also, we will discuss the next steps to close out the audit. Next slide. Okay, to close out the audit, the management letter is issued to the industry member. The management letter contains any tax adjustments identified, any compliance violations, and any internal control weaknesses. These will be the same violations identified and brought up during the closing conference. The management letter also states the applicable regulation and corrective action. Once the management letter is received by the industry member, they typically have 10 days to review, but can always ask for an extension if they need more time. Also, management letters are typically issued within 45 business days of the closing conference, but this could change based on the complexity of the audit. The industry member can provide a written response, but it is not required. Lastly, the management letter could have language as well regarding action against the taxpayer's permit. This could result in a suspension or even a permit being revoked if the issues are severe enough. Okay, next slide.
Thank you, Scott. So during TTB audits, there tend to be common audit findings across the board. I will go over the most common audit findings with tips on what should be included to ensure that your next TTB audit is a success. The common findings include: 1, the failure to timely file excise tax returns and failure to timely pay tax due on returns. It is important to timely file returns and pay excise tax to avoid any applicable penalties and interest. 2, the failure to timely file TTB monthly production, storage, and processing operation reports. 3, having incomplete or missing taxable removal documentation in support of excise tax determination. At a minimum, the documentation should include a serially numbered invoice or shipping document, including the ship's date, along with the product description and item number, the proof gallons removed and effective tax rate utilized, and the name of the customer and their address who received the product. 4, having incomplete or missing documentation for exported spirits. It is important to prepare and file the export withdrawal form, TTB form 5100.11, and ensure that the exported amounts on the form 5100.11 reconcile to the amounts reported on the monthly operation reports. 5, failure to gauge the receipts or removals of spirits by transfer and bond. 6, having incomplete or missing documentation for receipts or removals of spirits by transfer and bond. The regulations require a detailed list of attributes on the documentation for when spirits are transferred in bond. Specifically, the transfer records need to include a unique serial number of the transfer record, the serial number and date of TTB form 5100.16, which is the application of transferred spirits, the name and DSP number of the consignor, the name and DSP number of the consignee, the account from which the spirits were removed for transfer, that is the production, storage, or processing account, a description of the spirits, a notation to indicate when spirits are being transferred in bond from a production facility to another DSP, the identification of the conveyance, the identity of the seals, locks, or other devices affixed to the conveyance or package, the date of transfer, and the signature and title of the consignor, including a penalty of perjury statement. As you can see, there is quite a lengthy list of attributes that are required when removals of spirits are made by transfer and bond. So it is important to ensure that there are policies and procedures in place to capture all the necessary information on the transfer record. And then, when spirits are received by transfer and bond, the transfer and bond records need to be updated with the results of the receipt by including 1, the date of the receipt, a notation whether the securing devices on the conveyance were or were not intact on arrival, the gauge of spirits, including proof gallons received, and any losses or gains, a notation of any excess in transit loss, missing packages, tampering, or repair and theft, the account to which the spirits were deposited, which would be the production, storage, or processing account, and the signature and title of the consignee with the penalty of perjury statement. Updating the results on the transfer and bond records ensures that the transfer of spirits is completely documented from the beginning to the end of the transfer process. The next common finding is the failure to perform required physical inventories. The regulations require that physical inventories of bottled and packaged spirits in the processing account should be performed for the periods ending June 30th and December 31st. And physical inventories of bulk spirits held in the processing account should be performed at the close of each calendar quarter. The eighth finding, having incomplete or missing inventory records. The regulations require that inventory records should include 1, the date of the inventory, the identity of the containers, the kind and quantity of spirits, gains or shortages and any losses, the proprietor's signature or the signature of the person taking the inventory with the penalties of perjury statement included, and records that document any overages, gains, or losses disclosed by an inventory. 9, the failure to pay excise tax due on physical inventory shortages found. The regulations require that payment of tax on unexplained shortages of bottled distilled spirits must be paid immediately on the excise tax return, TTB form 5000.24. And the final common audit finding is having inadequate or missing documentation for destructions. The regulations require that a destruction record should include 1, the identification of the spirits, including kind, quantity, elements of gauge, name, and permit number of the producer, warehouseman, or processor, an identity and type of container. The record should also include the date, time, and place and manner of the destruction, a statement that the spirits had or had not previously been withdrawn and returned to bond, and the name and title of any representative of the proprietor who accomplished or supervised the destruction. The Craft Beverage Modernization Act, also referred to as CBMA, became effective on January 1st, 2018. The act allows a reduced tax rate on distilled spirits that are distilled or processed and removed or imported during the calendar year. The reduced tax rates are $2.70 per proof gallon on the first 100,000 proof gallons removed or imported, and $13.34 per proof gallon on the next 22.13 million proof gallons removed or imported. All remaining distilled spirits not eligible for the reduced tax rates are subject to a tax rate of $13.50 per proof gallon. It should be noted that effective at the beginning of fiscal year 2022, only distillers who perform a processing activity other than bottling are entitled to take a CBMA reduced tax rate on distilled spirits that the distillery processes and removes. In regards to distilled spirits produced outside of the United States and imported, the Act provides for foreign distilled spirit manufacturers to assign the reduced tax rate to importers who elect to receive the reduced rate. Please be aware that there will be a change under CBMA regarding the process for the reduced tax rate for importers, which will become effective this coming year in 2023. The change will require that the full rate of tax must be paid on imported distilled spirits, and then the importer may refile a refund claim with TTB after the close of each calendar quarter in order to take advantage of the CBMA reduced tax rate. And finally, transfer of distilled spirits and bond for beverage purposes between distilled spirits plants is now authorized for non-bulk or bottled distilled spirits. However, it should be noted that it became effective back on January 1st of 2021 that transfers of bottled spirits for beverage purposes are not authorized for transfers between bonded premises belonging to the same person or member of a controlled group, or certain transfers to storage or bottling where the spirits are transferred back to the original transfer. The TTB link provided in this presentation can be accessed for additional information regarding CBMA. Record-keeping tips to ensure that the regulations are followed include 1. Maintaining separate records by DSP account, which includes the production, storage, and processing accounts. Each account should have their own set of records to support what is reported on those monthly reports. 2. Ensure there is an audit trail. TTB auditors must be able to follow the transactions starting from daily records and going to the summary records, which then can be traced to the monthly operation reports and federal excise tax returns. 3. For each operation conducted, create a dedicated record that contains all the mandatory information listed on the corresponding regulation. And 4. Maintain required supporting TTB records for a minimum of 3 years. These tips will help facilitate compliance. Key pointers to ensure you are ready for your next TTB audit. Most importantly, timely pay your federal excise taxes and timely file your returns. File all required TTB monthly operation reports in a complete, accurate, and timely manner, and be aware of and follow laws and regulatory requirements. Informational resources that can be referenced include Title 27 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 19, Chapter 51 of the Internal Revenue Code, Title 26, TTB National Revenue Center, and the TTB website. In regards to common audit findings, several regulations under Title 27 that are a great resource for what documentation should be included are CFR Part 19.236 regarding due dates for tax returns, Parts 19.237 through 19.240 for tax return payments, Part 19.632 for submission of monthly operation reports, Part 19.611 for records of tax determination, Part 28.92 regarding the TTB Form 5100.11, which is the application or notice for exported spirits without payment of tax, Parts 19.620 and 19.621 for attributes required on the transfer and bond records, Parts 19.371 and 372 for when physical inventories in the processing account should be taken, Part 19.623 for what must be included on the inventory records, Part 19.617 for what must be included on the destruction records, Part 19.461 for physical inventory shortages, and Part 19.465 for shortages of bottled spirits. Additional information, resources for the production records and what is required can be found under Title 27 CFR 19,584 through 586. Resources for the storage records can be found under Title 27 CFR 19.590 through 593, and resources for the processing records can be found under Title 27 CFR 19,596 through 604. The Tax Audit Division contact information is provided for your reference and can be utilized if you have any questions that are not addressed today. As stated at the beginning of the presentation, our team is part of the Central One Audit Tax Division and specializes in distilled spirits.
Awesome. Well, thank you, team, for all of that. And again, we would love your feedback on the survey, and we appreciate the time today. Thank you so much.
Visit TTB's official YouTube channel at USTTB.gov for more TTB-related content. And remember to click subscribe so you'll always know when we upload new videos.